Welcome, everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect with you. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. The webinar will begin in just a second. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the conversation to respond to the questions you post. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all who registered. And we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars, including sessions in this 12:30 p.m. Eastern time slot and sessions in the 3 p.m. time slot as well. Later today at 3 p.m., we have Technology to Accelerate Learning, Tech-Enabled Solutions to Address Learning Loss. This session will be co-sponsored by the Overdeck Family Foundation and will continue the Learning Loss Recovery Challenge series of our webinars. Next week, we will have the chance to learn more about engaging and effective summer strategies from partners in San Mateo, California, in the 12:30 Eastern time slot, the Crucible of Practice session, followed by an exploration of the power and potential of family resource centers to support families and communities, especially rural communities. The following week will include a funder-to-funder conversation with Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, followed by an examination of efforts by the FCC to expand access to broadband. We'll be sure to add a link in the chat box for more information and registration for these upcoming learning opportunities. Joining you now is Jenny Atkinson, consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Sierra, and thanks to all of you for joining us for our peer exchange learning conversation today. These webinars are designed with an intentionally flexible format for sharing of found pilots and other early stage solutions for common challenges. Our goal is to host thematically framed conversations among communities, partners, and other stakeholders around the latest work that they're doing to slow, stop, and reverse learning loss and advance the early school success prospects of children from economically challenged families, neighborhoods, and communities. Our conversation will lift up what communities and partners are doing and how they're doing it, as well as what they've learned and how they intend to apply what they've learned for ongoing success. We believe that sharing what we've learned and gathering in conversation will lead us all to do better work, get better faster, and grow to do this work at scale. As communities think about providing a continuum of supports and services for children and families, they're often left on their own to figure out how to align, link, stack, and bundle programs and resources in a way that makes sense, provides multiple touch points with children and families, and builds on the successes that those children and families have. Today, we are highlighting a group of national partners that have come together to do this kind of stacking and bundling on the front end, using what they know about the best way to use their resources and thinking carefully about ways that their programs best work together. We're really looking forward to hearing more about their work in this webinar, Radical Collaboration, Peer Partnership for Greater Local Impact. I'm happy to introduce the moderator for today's conversation, Michelle Sioson Hyman. As Senior Vice President of Program and Partnerships at Raising a Reader, Michelle is responsible for overseeing program development, growth, and impact. Michelle has had a long-standing commitment to child development, both professionally and personally. She has worked within the philanthropic sector and across the public systems that are in place to support the education, health, and well-being of young children as the Deputy Director for the Center for Early Learning at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation and as a Program Officer for First 5 San Mateo and First 5 Santa Cruz counties. Michelle's first job in high school was at a children's bookstore where she spent hours reading picture books, so it's impossible for her to identify just one favorite. But a favorite she shares with her 2 children is Nuffle Bunny by Mo Willems. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you to the whole CGLR team for having us here today. So we're really honored to bring together a few of our partners for today's discussion. And partnership for Raising Reader is really part of our DNA. And I'll tell you more on how and why I say that a little bit later. But just to say, when we were given the opportunity to talk about partnership, we jumped at the chance. So now I'm thrilled to be joined today by 5 of our partners. Each will have the opportunity to share more about themselves, their organizations, and what partnership means to them and what partnership with Raising a Reader and how that may add value to their own organization. But what we know at Raising a Reader is that partnering with each of these organizations and their teams is that we are serving children, families, and communities better. So for today's agenda, we'll spend the bulk of the time in discussion with each other, but to set the context, I'll provide an overview of Raising a Reader and what brought us all here together. So Raising a Reader was founded about 20 years ago with the foundational belief that early literacy and family engagement are the cornerstone to creating equity and opportunity for all. Since our inception, the fundamental philosophy of Raising a Reader is that we cannot do this work alone. Next slide. We work alongside a trusted network of affiliates and partners such as Save the Children, who is here today. So these are partners that are in a variety of different settings and across sectors, from large national community-based organizations serving multiple communities across the country to Carol's Tiny Tots family child care home, from home visiting programs to employer-based benefit programs. Raising a Reader has worked with our partners in local communities and been able to adapt and respond to local communities' needs. So Raising a Reader believes that our unique role in serving children and families and communities is really rooted in our vision of kindergarten readiness and school success for all children, which we will achieve by embedding our ABCs in our theory of change. So our ABCs, in the next slide, are to activate engagement, build knowledge, and create connections in all that we do. So to sum up our theory of change, we believe that family shared reading and learning routines are foundation to kindergarten readiness and overall school success. We know that our program, in order to be effective, must be research and evidence-based, truly turnkey and easy for our partners on the ground to implement in the variety of settings and across all the sectors in which children and families interact. Our materials must also be diverse, inclusive, and representative of the families we serve, from the migrant farm worker in the Central Valley of California to the grandparents raising their granddaughter in Minot, North Dakota. We also know that for our materials to actually be used in the home, that they have to spark joy and fun and curiosity of the children and families that we serve. So next slide. So for our first 21 years, we were really known primarily for one thing, which is our classic Red Book Bag program. Next slide. This is our model where children, whether they're in a family childcare home or a kindergarten classroom, in those different settings that I mentioned before, is where they receive a red book bag that's filled with high quality award-winning books to really practice and sustain this habit of sharing books with their families. Families are then are given research-based training to develop this habit of shared reading, and then families are connected to the local libraries to sustain these reading routines. Next slide. So this is the model that really helped us grow to scale. So you'll see here in this slide that we are in 36 states and we have close to 300 affiliate partner agencies working with us across the country. We serve about 130,000 children annually, and we are deeply committed to research and evaluation, and we have over 39 independent evaluations that we've done over the course of those 20 years. So this past year really gave Raising a Reader an opportunity to take a moment to listen to our affiliates, partners, and communities via a listening tour that included parent conversations, weekly town hall meetings with our affiliates, and multiple surveys. Next slide. We wanted to hear how children, families, and communities' needs were changing and what Raising a Reader's role might be and how we can address those evolving needs. So some of the key things that we heard from the community and from parents is that there's a need for both print and digital resources, that there's a need for materials in the family's home language, and that families are overwhelmed, stressed, and feeling isolated, and that they needed resources to support the learning in the home. So next slide. So we really imagined and responded with 2 new programs, and today I'm going to focus on one of them, which is our Super Summer Learning Adventure Program. Next slide. The summer of 2021 will be one of the most important summers that we've known. So we know that children have been out of in-person school routines with lower than ever school enrollment. I know you all know this, that's on the call today. But we also know that children, families, schools, and communities learned so much this past year of how to support children's learning in the home. Many families and teachers work together more closely than ever before. Families have not only stepped up, but they also rose to the challenge of being a true partner in their child's learning. Data from a recent National PTA and Learning Heroes survey show that a majority of parents and caregivers are very likely to extremely likely to use summer learning resources that are sent at home. And so we developed our Super Summer Learning Adventures program. Our Super Summer Learning Adventures program provides a bilingual family guide with 6 weeks of daily learning activities that are aligned to Common Core. To promote that joy of reading and that sustained shared reading routine, we've included bilingual books, a digital book library that's powered by Worldreader, the Highlights High Five Bilingual magazine, and a special invitation to Read with Malcolm's Read Camp reading challenge. And to complement the family guide, the pack also contains a reading journal as well as alphabet, writing, and math manipulatives. Our educator pack provides summer learning teachers, camp counselors, and other educators the same materials that the families receive, as well as access to our Family Learning Circles app, which you'll hear a little bit more about later, that's powered by Guardians Collective. So next slide. So in designing the Super Summer Learning Adventures, Raising Reader had a new opportunity to really explore how we're thinking about our philosophy around partnership. So as I mentioned earlier, Raising a Reader's DNA is rooted in partnership, but that's not to say it's always easy. Partnership in general amongst peers has historically been fraught. Oftentimes without meaning to, the public and private funding streams create a mindset of scarcity and territory among nonprofits. And of course, nonprofits have had to consider how would partnership affect the fidelity of their model. So these are all things Raising a Reader has struggled with. So, but in designing Super Summer, we decided to flip those notions on their head a little bit. And we thought, and we asked ourselves, how might we identify like-minded, mission-aligned partners who can help us serve children, families, and communities better? And we leaned into the concept of continuous improvement, and that there is not one single solution, just as there's not just one single family story that will serve the needs of all families across the country. And so this is what really brought us together with the partners that we are joined with here today. So each partner helps us strengthen our theory of change from adding more fun, not that we weren't fun before, to deepening our ability for families to connect and learn from each other, to helping us reach more children and families in underserved communities. So now I'm really excited to introduce you to these partners who will now have a few minutes to share about themselves, their organizations, and how their partnership with Raising Reader helps deepen and align with their own goals. So we'll start with Guardians Collective. So powered by Guardians Collective, as I mentioned, in our educator pack, we will provide a family learning circle app. And this app really provides families an opportunity to have group conversations with each other that's facilitated by an educator that really helps promote that peer-to-peer learning and reducing that feeling of isolation that we know that many families are feeling. So now I'd like to invite Saurabh to tell us more about himself and about Guardians Collective.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Saurabh Kamalapurkar, and I'm the founder of Guardians Collective. Before starting Guardians Collective, I spent a decade working on refugee education. So what does, I worked on basically creating parent education programs for families that have just reached a refugee camp in East Africa, South Africa, and some parts of Asia. At Guardians Collective, our mission is really simple. We're trying to deal with the isolation and the feeling of loneliness that families go through on a day-to-day basis, just wanting the best for their kids. So in 2019, we started off as an experiment with a really simple idea. Would families that are going through a similar stage in parenting have something to share with each other and learn from each other? And would these conversations provide extreme value if they were facilitated and moderated by an early childhood educator? And to our surprise, it turns out, that these parenting groups that are run on text messaging threads by early childhood educators are actually super valuable, especially given everything that has happened over last year. So what began as a 30 family experiment in 2019 has now grown to about 5,000 families all across the US. When Michelle first approached us for an opportunity to partner with Raising a Reader, we got really excited about the opportunity. As we all know, there is a lot that happens between a family or a child sitting down with a book and them becoming excellent, curious readers. And that's a journey that incredible educators have the opportunity to take the kids on. But as we all know, bulk of the learning and connection with the books happens at home. So the question became, could we create a space for families, to connect on a day-to-day basis about how these reading assignments were coming along for their kids? Turns out, the minutia of day-to-day challenges are better served by early childhood educators. And if you get a chance to create text messaging threads about it, families connect a lot more frequently. So on an average, these groups have about 4 families in them, paired with 1 early childhood educator. Families share about 5 to 7 messages a day, oftentimes around challenges that they're facing or just something funny that happened when their kids sat down with a book. And we're really excited about this model that Raising a Reader has proposed. Back to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Saurabh. So now I'm excited to introduce to you Mary Alice at Highlights. We're excited to be able to include Highlights High Five Bilingual magazine in all of our Super Summer packs. And just as an aside, when we were first talking about partnership, Mary Alice and her team sent us a big box of Highlights materials. And my kids tore open that box and they were on the floor, just surrounded by all of these Highlights magazines and workbooks. And that's what I hope that all children have the opportunity to do, is that they're surrounded by high quality materials that they just can't absorb fast enough. And so we're really excited to be partnering with Highlights. And so Mary Alice, I'll hand it off to you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I'm really honored to be part of this crowd, so thank you very much for including me. I have to start by saying that I too had a stint early in my career where I managed a children's bookstore, and once you do that, I think your life has changed forever. I have spent most of my career in children's publishing, creating and curating experiences for kids, which is my passion. I did have one other little detour where I was director of an early childhood center for about 2 years. And that too sort of informed my thinking about the advocacy piece of creating experiences for kids. But I work at Highlights, and I have for the last 12 years. We are celebrating our 75th birthday this year, which is kind of an exciting milestone for the company, but it is a company that is really a company of beliefs. We are obviously known for our flagship magazines and book publishing and apps and all of that, but it was really founded with a belief system, 3 major beliefs. The first one is that children are the world's most important people. And that is really a North Star for us in terms of how we think about things. We also believe that childhood is a short, sweet season. And as adults, we really have a responsibility to help children become their best selves. And we believe that kids can become their best selves if they really grow up believing that they matter and that what they think matter, and that they understand the value of kindness, that they understand the importance of moral courage. And the way we go about that, the way we like to think about it, is that our job is to help nurture optimism in kids. And when we say optimism, we don't mean the kind of cheery, put a smile on honey, or just look at the world with a glass half full attitude, but really that growth mindset, that sense of really feeling like you can make a difference if you're given the right chance. And we know that lots of kids don't have a lot of agency in their lives. So can we help them become their best selves? Can we help them develop creativity, curiosity, caring, and in all of the ways and parts of their lives? And that's one of the reasons this partnership model is so interesting to us, because we do create content and experiences and products that we think kids will love, and we have great ways to reach them through our traditional means. But we also know there's lots of kids that we aren't reaching, and lots of kids who don't have that opportunity to get access to really high quality materials, to adults that care about them, to situations that allow them to really nurture and become their best selves. So for us, partnerships become a way to extend our reach, to deepen our impact in the world, and to really fulfill and come back around to that notion that if we believe children are the world's most important people, we need to extend ourselves and create an opportunity for them to become that. So I'm delighted to be here, and I can't wait to hear more.
Thank you, Mary Alice. So Raising a Reader is thrilled to partner with Read with Malcolm, Share the Magic Foundation this summer, and we're extending that partnership even further in deeper ways, even beyond, which we'll more to tell later. But I'm now excited to introduce to you Super Bowl champion, author, and literacy advocate, Malcolm Mitchell.
Hi, Michelle. I promise not to go too long, but I do want to tell my story. It's important, as I began to speak, that everyone understands that I represent the community of disadvantaged and impoverished. Now, what does that mean? Well, growing up in Valdosta, Georgia, I was just like every other child. I did what most children did. I paid attention to athletics and did not fully understand the importance of an education. I also understand how being positive is sometimes diluted by a missing father, or paying attention in the classroom takes a back seat to being hungry. These are the realities that many kids in our communities face. It's the same reality that I faced. Luckily, I was blessed with an ability to play football, and that granted me the opportunity to go to the University of Georgia, which presented an opportunity for me to have more time to correct the dire mistake that I made. And that's not understanding that my brain is just as powerful as my body. That if I gave my brain just as much attention as I gave my body as an athlete, it would take me to similar places. So at the age of 19 or 20, I went on this journey of becoming an avid reader. And what I learned is that reading gave me the ability to think deeply, to have mindful knowledge acquisition. It kind of enhanced my critical thinking, deductive reasoning, imagination, reflection, attention, comprehension, curiosity, empathy. And I realized that I could be the best person I could possibly be if I was a reader. Unfortunately, I did not grasp this message as a child, but through learning and going through this transformation, it became important for me to reach back into my community. So I created Share the Magic Foundation, and we focus on book ownership and inspiring kids to become lifelong readers. And I'm excited about our partnership with Raising a Reader because it allows us to reach more children, provide more resources, and build a stronger, more robust foundation to expand children's opportunity to become readers. I am from an athletic background, so I definitely understand iron sharpens iron, but sometimes you must work together to go further and not work against each other. So all these nonprofits coming together is a very beautiful thing to help many, many children. So Michelle, thank you. I know that was a lot, but I wanted to get it all in before we started our conversation.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. And now I'm excited to introduce to you Karen Harrison from Save the Children. As I mentioned, we've relied on partners like Save the Children for years who have their feet on the ground and the pulse on our local communities. And Save the Children has been an affiliate partner with Raising a Reader since the mid-2000s. So Karen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Yes, I'm excited to be here as we have a long history with Raising a Reader. Save the Children is a humanitarian nonprofit organization. We work in over 100 countries doing whatever it takes in times of crisis and every day to give children a healthy start in life and an opportunity to learn and protect them from harm. In America, in the US, we've been on the ground since 1932, providing support to the most isolated and underserved children in rural America. So we really target those children that are living in rural America that may not have access to things that children in other parts of the country do. Across America, the experiences shaping children's lives are starkly different. Save the Children wants all children in rural America to have healthy, strong foundations to thrive as learners and in life. Every child deserves a future, and we actively seek to identify and reach through our programs and advocacy those most at risk of being left behind. Currently, there are 2.3 million children living in poverty in rural America. Through partnership, we provide direct programs, including home visiting for families that are prenatal and have children through the age of 3. For children 3 to 5, we collaborate with Raising a Reader to provide the book bag exchange that Michelle talked about and kindergarten readiness opportunities. Additionally, we support local rural school districts through school age programs that increase educational opportunities for young children. Through COVID-19, we drastically adapted our programs to be virtual and to include new initiatives such as supporting rural communities with food insecurity and ensuring children and families have access to educational supplies and materials both for in-person learning and for virtual. So many of our programs that had been in person historically since their inception, we're now moving to virtual, and we really relied on materials and resources that other organizations had, such as Raising a Reader, to really ensure that our folks that had never provided virtual learning opportunities before had the tools they needed to do so as effectively as possible with young children. We're really excited about the new initiatives that Raising a Reader has shared. We will be accessing those in our programs. It will also help increase the reach to children in rural areas that we serve. So we'll be serving more children than we've ever served before. Through the Super Summer Packs and the Family Shared Reading programs, we will reach children and families and really continue to be connected to those families and really support those families. We know that children having books is not enough. We want children to have books. We've done a lot in terms of providing gift in kind and providing opportunities for families to receive materials. But through these new Raising a Reader initiatives, we really hope to support families to interact with their children in ways that really intentionally increase those literacy opportunities. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, Karen. And we are excited to offer a digital book library that's powered by Booksmart by Worldreader. And so Kristen is here today to tell us a little bit more about Worldreader.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be here with such a fantastic group, a cohort of collaborators. So I'm the Director of US Programs for Worldreader, and I have over 20 years of education in both classroom and curriculum development for nonprofit organizations, corporate organizations, rural schools and urban schools, and collaboration was honestly my favorite part of teaching. At Worldreader, we have worked in the Global South for the last 10 years, and we've just launched this year in the United States to support our mission of working with partners to support vulnerable communities with digital reading solutions that help learning outcomes, workforce readiness, and gender equity. And I have to say, one of my favorite quotes from our training sessions when we work with partners is that your success is our success. As with Raising a Reader, we see the most success when we can support our partners by bringing their deep on-the-ground community roots and relationships with families together with a diverse and global collection of books. We use over 64 publishers from around the world. So they're books that you would never see anywhere else in this country. For example, as we collaborate together on the Super Summer Learning Adventure, all of us that are on this webinar today, we're able to provide a set of books and resources that families would probably normally not have access to, but we're meeting families where they are, and we're meeting children where they are in a variety of formats and with a variety of skills. We assist our nonprofit partners and school partners by being able to extend the reach through the quantity of books that we can provide in the home that are available on a mobile device. But we have a structured book program that comes with this. That's a book of the week. It includes a reading activity, a social emotional learning activity, and a play-based activity for each book for caregivers and children to do together. And they're very short activities for all literacy levels of parents to work with their children and provide wonderful, wonderful conversations for children and families to have together about the books. We also provide this shared reading experience so that communities can work together and talk together and have conversations around the books that they've read. We believe that stories are a wonderful way to reach children and help them build not only an additional background knowledge, but also provide an avenue for very hard conversations that children are having these days, and through these observable lessons through the characters that they see. We really feel like this combination of digital access to books and partners with deep community relationships are able to extend reach beyond anything either of us could do separately, and really helping Raising a Reader support your mission of school success for all.
Thank you, Kristen. And now I'd like to invite the whole crew back on. So if you could all turn on your videos, your cameras, that's great. So now I'm excited to engage in a discussion with all of you. And we had a prep call the other week, and if the prep call is anything like what today's going to be, you're all in for a great treat. So I'm going to just start us off with a conversation, and whoever wants to jump in first, go for it. But the question is, how has our current landscape of multiple pandemics, COVID-19, racism, more impacted your thoughts about partnership now and beyond?
I'm happy to go first as the last speaker before. I think it's so important now more than ever, because these partnerships are really needed to form deep community access and literacy access. We can do so much more together than we could ever do apart. And instead of looking at resources as a scarcity of something that you have to guard, now we can extend the resources when we bring them together. Even looking at everyone on this call, my brain is just a fire of all the ways that we could work together, even beyond the Super Summer Learning Adventure, to really reach the families that we serve.
I would say very much the same thing. We've had to really diversify who our partners have been. We've always worked in rural communities, so have always relied on local partnerships, whether that's a school district or a library. There's limited resources in rural areas. However, really the new partnerships that we've been able to establish through this and really dive deeper into those partnerships to really lean on the folks that know their communities the best have really supported us in being able to grow our partnerships as well. We've expanded with folks like the USDA and folks we've never partnered with before, which has really increased our ability to connect with families, not only with the basic needs and resources that they need, but we can really include things like educational resources, materials, and books for those families.
And I can say that for us, it was interesting sort of on the other side of it. When COVID hit last year, we discovered almost immediately that there was an increased demand for our magazines, our books, particularly our workbooks and things that had a sort of very specific kind of application to school skills and practice skills and all of that. And that was a great benefit. But what we also started to think about is who are the kids we're not reaching, right? What are the kids with the greater need, and finding really partnerships was the way for us to think about how can we reach the kids we don't reach through our traditional, channels of trade, and how can we find them, and how can we not try to reinvent logistical systems that already exist, but how do we feed into them? And that can sometimes be actually a lot more complicated than you want it to be, or because it will slow down the day-to-day. But if there's ways to kind of streamline that or make that more efficient, you open up greater opportunities for partnership. But we saw it almost immediately. We knew there was an increased demand.
I think just to, yes, and all of the answers, one of the biggest things that we've been trying to gauge early on is how much value does the peer community of parents add to each other? And these peer communities have existed informally for a long time, but during the pandemic, it was pretty clear that just-in-time supports that were primarily driven as peer conversations had a huge impact on parents' stress levels. So families being like, hey, this is what I'm seeing in my 2-year-old. Are you seeing something similar? And then an educator being able to go on that messaging thread and saying, hey, I've worked in this for 10 years, seen this hundreds of times, you have nothing to worry about. And just being able to close that loop in 5 minutes flat is something that was a pretty magical experience. And just to add on to the equity portion of it, these epidemics have made a lot of things visible that perhaps only a small section of the society, because of their experience, already knew about. As soon as the pandemic began, we saw clear disparities between what materials were sent to some of our lower income neighborhoods, which were mostly around food and discipline and all of this stuff. And on the other side of the well-resourced communities, you saw resources around learn a new language, make a kite at home. And just that, our digital tools were supposed to solve this, right? We said that these free tools would have the same reach as all of the resources, but it was very clear early on that that's not going to happen unless we're very, very intentional about it.
Perfectly said by everyone. For me, my focus is definitely the poverty pockets and book deserts in our country and around the world. So to the point that has already been made, disparities existed long before COVID-19. and the racial tension that's been created over the last year or so. I think what it did do, it forced everyone to sit back and to really try to figure out what's the issue and what's the best way to move forward. And like everyone else, I did what I thought was best. I consumed a massive amount of information, asked why 10,000 times, trying to get to the bottom line. And for me, what I understand through my experience and the information that I've gained over just reading a ton of text is that literacy is a poverty issue and it's a health issue. And if you cannot read, you cannot maneuver your way into situations or out of situations that are unfavorable. So it's heartbreaking, but it does strengthen my beliefs, and literacy is definitely a way to move the agenda forward. And providing those assets are definitely a challenge, but continuing to try to do so is important. And that's why partnerships mean a lot, because it creates this very strong and robust foundation needed to establish a strong foundation for these communities are just being ripped apart.
Thank you. And you all touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to know if you could go a little bit deeper on how partnerships help us serve children and families better.
I'll just pick up where I left off. I know we're all limited to our experience, right? Malcolm at Share the Magic Foundation can only understand and do what Malcolm at Share the Magic Foundation understands. But partnerships allows communication with other groups that may see an issue from a different perspective. And instead of attacking the problem from my singular point of view, I can attach with another organization, and we can attack the issue from 2 or 3, 4 or 5, in this case, 6 or 7 different points of view that create a bigger opportunity for the child to be impacted and actually move in the direction that we all want them to go. And that's why partnerships mean a ton to me. It's just, it gives more opportunity for the child.
I was just thinking about that right before we got on that. And I'm so glad you said that about bringing the thought leadership together, because it's not just the tangible resources that we're able to bring together. So even from an operational standpoint, to reach multiple communities, we don't want to spend our dollars on staffing. We want to spend our dollars on bringing a service to children. But the idea that we can bring thought leadership together, because my one single idea is not going to be as great as multiple ideas and insights and shared experiences together. And the fact that we can bring our organizations with the experiences that they've had together, I think the synergy of just this many brains together is such a great thing.
And working in rural areas, we really struggled with the digital divide. And so being able to partner with other agencies that had ideas around solutions, there was so many solutions out there, but that wasn't one of our strong suits. So we really relied on partners that had that expertise, that had that knowledge to be able to help us, navigate those waters together.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. The other benefit is that you get the various kinds of expertise. So you're not having to invent something that somebody already knows how to do. So you bring your expertise and combine it with somebody else, and you really get a much more elevated opportunity and plan.
Just to add on top of that, I think one of the exciting parts about the partnership with Raising a Reader is generally to basically reimagine how educators show up as helpful resources for the families inside of their homes. So it is an opportunity for us to extend the reach of an educator beyond what they would do if the kids were in school, to how the families are making the decisions at home. And I think, with all of the experience that Raising a Reader has and all of the content and amazing sourcing of incredible stories, now we're starting to see, what do those stories look like? What do those books feel like when a family is sitting down with a child and trying to compare that experience with 5 others who are probably fighting the same challenges?
Thanks, Saurabh. That's a nice segue into another topic that we touched in the prep meeting. Was we all talked about the joy and sparking curiosity. And if you could just share a little bit about what that means for your organization and what this partnership means, and just sparking the joy and curiosity of children and families around reading.
Well, I can start if you want. Highlights, our tagline is fun with a purpose. And so we really believe that that is an integrated idea and not kind of, a content where you layer something interesting on top of it, but rather it's absolutely integrated. And the more kids are engaged in something, the longer they stay involved, the deeper their belief in it is, and the more they benefit from it. So we think a lot about that all the time when in creating content and experiences. But again, if you can help reach more kids by bringing that to another organization or another delivery system or another way that you can reach kids you might not typically reach through your normal course of business, you sort of make that even a bigger opportunity.
We intentionally, and it's one of the things that I really loved when I was first looking at all of our books, put a play-based activity for parents to do with their children. And it did remind me, after being raised on highlights and using highlights in my classroom and with my own children, a lot of just that joyful interaction around a book, but not in a way that feels overly academic or it feels like it's a chore. So some of our activities are things like, because the character might have felt less secure and wanted to go to a place to, kind of sit and reflect or sit with a friend, or was not sure about engaging with the other children on the playground, the prompt for the child and the caregiver to do together is grab some pillows and blankets and make a fort. While you're doing that, parents may not know they're also having a conversation about the book. So it's building these great literacy skills. It's actively moving around. It's building this bonding time between caregivers and children, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And it's, not a stressful situation to interact with the book. But, this idea of keeping on and going back to reading and looking at what's happening with characters in their development is such a great way to, kind of almost secretly build influency skills. But I've really enjoyed watching the play-based and then having conversations with community partners who are, because it's a global collection, either talking about how do we pronounce children's names and the stories that they see, and then why, having a larger conversation with facilitators on why it's important to call someone by their first name and not shorten their name or not give them a nickname. But it's led to these really deeper conversations.
And really the conversation is as important as the reading itself, right? It's how you reflect on it, reflect back on it, and bring that engagement together. So absolutely, it's as important as the book.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, Share the Magic Foundation, my foundation, we created virtual reading challenges. And it's all based on that idea of fun, joy, excitement, and inspiration. One thing that I challenged my foundation to do was tap into the minds of the kids who do not like to read. That wasn't hard for them because they could have just asked me because I was that child. So while we can give books, while we can talk about the benefits of reading being critical thinking, deep processing, imagination, and empathy, in a child, saying that to a child in a low income community it's in one ear and out the other. So kind of inviting them to be readers through fun, encouragement, joy. My very favorite is competition. We kind of let them fall in love with that idea and electrify their reading circuit, sometimes without them fully even knowing that they're becoming better readers and learning the skills to be better readers. And I think that's a key component when we talk about trying to get kids to be readers. If it's not fun, you'll lose them to video games. So finding a way to entice a child to want to read a book. And I think once they start, they'll find out it's much more pleasurable than they ever imagined. Yeah.
I just add on top of Kirsten's and Malcolm's point. I think this new world post-pandemic is giving us an opportunity to make more of the learning visible to the families. How do you get family involved in the experience of reading of that book? Could they read out loud? Will they make a few mistakes? Will those mistakes be funny? Probably. How will you show the family that they're actually improving now? So, I think like one of the things that joy, the idea of centering joy, it doesn't have to be always around what is being said in the book. Like one of the other panelists said, it could all be about reflecting. And then imagine if that reflection could take on a whole new dimension where you're able to reflect with other families that are not exactly in your same neighborhood, or sometimes maybe are just one door down. So playing with the ideas of space and time there will allow us to even activate more minds faster.
And I would say giving parents the confidence. I remember when I did work in a children's bookstore, I had a customer come in once and say, I don't actually know how to read to my baby. I don't know how to do it. Like, it's weird to me. I feel self-conscious. It's awkward. What am I doing wrong? And it's just, you realize if it also has to be enjoyable for the parent to make it, to create that connection. And, it's important.
And it's an on-ramp. Joy is an on-ramp to reading. We have to, if your experience as an adult was not a positive experience in school or with education, you need a different on-ramp besides just an expert telling you that literacy is important, and the fact that we can use joy as a way to remove a barrier for a family having a shared reading experience together, I think is great.
I think those are great points and absolutely correct. Research proves the community fosters change more than anything else. Again, when I spoke earlier, I said I wanted to represent the disadvantaged and impoverished. And there's a reason I said that, because that's the community that I come from. And one of the biggest challenges is this ideal of family, because it was completely disrupted years ago, and COVID and the racial pandemic also just increased the fractures within that community. Growing up as a child, I grew up in a single parent household. I have 3 siblings. Neither of my siblings nor I have a relationship with our father. My mother doesn't have a relationship with her father. My grandmother didn't have a relationship with her father, and the cycle goes on. Now, what's the point of me sharing that? The point is that when we think about family in certain communities, we have to restructure, reimagine the way we see that dynamic taking place. Because my mom is the most impactful person I have ever met. She has encouraged me to become the person I am today. Unfortunately, she was not able to read to me. Through environmental challenges and financial restraints that cause her to always be away. So I only say that because I continue to challenge myself every day with that thought in mind. How do we establish relationship in communities, reimagine the way we look at family, and provide resources that leave no one out? That's it.
And Karen, do you want to speak to, because I know that's something that Save the Children is about too, if you want to add anything there?
We work with a lot of families that grandparents or other family members are serving as the primary caregiver for children. So we really have tried to connect, and especially now during the pandemic, with those caregivers that maybe, virtual learning was not part of their plan when they decided to take on caregiving for children. And so really supporting those families through not only virtual methods, but also saying, if this isn't working for a family, how can we meet the family in the middle? What can we provide to those family members to really know that they are supported and they are that community that will help raise that child? And that's as important, if not more, than any other family system. And so really, truly, our goal is to connect with those local partners who know their communities best. We do not have expertise in every community that we're in. We really rely on the folks that are in those communities to lead us in the right direction, to say, here's what our community needs. And really, we have some tools that we can support with, but we don't want to direct what's happening in communities, because we know that those leaders in those communities know their communities best.
And that's actually one of the main reasons why Raising a Reader is so excited about this partnership, because with this partnership, we feel like we are able to serve communities better, to serve all families, whatever their structure, better. And that is one thing that we talked about in the prep call, is how this partnership and how partnerships in general builds, and Kristen touched on it, that on-ramp to literacy. And how can we talk about, share with the group how we think that our partnership can help make this easier for communities?
And I would just add too that I think the partnership with Raising a Reader has been so powerful because of quality. We as a nonprofit agency often received, lots of gift in kind and things like that to donate to families. But if it's not high quality, then it doesn't really support the family structure either, right? We want every family to know that regardless of where they live or where they come from, that we invest in high quality for them. And so that's why I believe that, it's so important to partner with folks like Raising a Reader, because the books that we get from them are so high quality. We can stand by them. We know that they've been vetted to make sure that they're very sensitive, that they're, really appropriate for that age group, all those kinds of things. And so it is important to have these partnerships where we have somebody who can go in and kind of vet all those things for us in terms of appropriate literacy experiences for young children.
I love talking about on-ramps, because I think, like anybody in this call, it's removing barriers. If you could physically remove the barriers, you would. But we are constantly solving the issue of barriers to access to literacy, whether it's the structures in the community. I think we have to constantly look for these on-ramps. With the digital solution, we've been incredibly cognizant that we are working in communities that don't have access to reliable internet sources. So a lot of our solutions come out of our work in the global South, in India and Africa, and some in Central America, where how do you give 400 books, put 400 books in the home? How do you structure reading programs so that parents who are, constantly working, or caregivers are constantly working and may not have 30 minutes to sit down and read with a child? How do you provide a quality experience around that? And so we've really worked very hard to optimize books so that they can be downloaded, so that they work on very low bandwidth, so they don't take up a lot of data. We talk with partners around structuring the week, so that if you are working with a parent who may have 3 children, you're having to divvy up the data plan, that each child may only have access to, a certain amount of gigabytes, how to do that and how to plan ahead for that. But we really do try to look at, if we're supporting rural communities or urban communities where there are book deserts, where having a book that belongs to you is such a treasure. How can we amplify that number of books in addition to the hard copy book? How can we give you then access to other books that are in your language, or that these parent conversations are in your language, so that now you may be reading in English, but you're able to have these conversations with your family in the language that your family is strongest in. So I think that's definitely thinking about those on-ramps. I love puzzles and solving problems, and putting my full brain power to solving this puzzle, I think, is with a group is the step, a step in the right direction to working on that equitable access.
I would totally add to that. I think in the Q&A that there were a couple of questions around just the language barriers, along with multi-generational households and other challenges that we face. I feel like one of the things that Guardians Collective has done since the beginning is language agnostic text messaging, where all the families will get text messages in whatever language they prefer, even if it's not English, and the messages that they share will be shared in whatever languages the other families in that group are comfortable with. I think that's just like, at this stage where how far we've come in the tech world, that's table stakes. We all have to be able to do that. And then also, the way Malcolm said it, I absolutely love that we need to rethink our definitions around family engagement programs, and understand why the non-participation or the challenges in those traditional programs has been. We've been incredibly lucky because we can reframe those conversations in a way that very few systemic actors can, which is why, at Guardians Collective, we see about 5 to 7 messages a day, which in a one-way text messaging platform would be traditionally unheard of. So, reimagining the constraints of what we have, and opening up newer alliances for care between educators and programs and content and families at home at 8 o'clock when there's literally nothing else going on is what will open up a lot more avenues for us to connect with the families.
I can only reiterate what everyone has already said. Removing the barriers, providing free resources, and educating on the benefits of using those resources. One of the things that we've noticed at Share the Magic Foundation from all of our work is everyone wants to succeed. I've never met a human being that said, I don't want to succeed. I've never met a person that says, I don't want my child to succeed. I've never met a person who willingly wants to be disadvantaged. So it's just, it's hard, and it definitely is. It's the toughest puzzle that I've ever tried to complete. So just continue to try to find ways to provide the resources in a way that they can be consumed and applied rapidly to change the trajectory of people's lives is, I think, why we're all here.
And then just to provide some thoughts, advice, insights for folks on the call who might be thinking about partnership and embarking on new partnerships or seeking out partnerships, what advice do you have for folks there?
The chat mentioned childcare, and I think it's an important topic to highlight is, childcare, many places where we work in rural America, there's childcare deserts as well. So childcare is really limited. It's a lot of friends and family care that's happening. But we need to do, we need to do work as a community to really acknowledge those childcare providers, knowing that's where many children are, it's a big part of their early childhood experiences in those childcares. So not only are bigger childcare centers like Head Start programs and things like that, but those friends and family cares that might be unlicensed. We know that close to 50% of the population in the US are accessing unlicensed childcare. So, those care providers are still spending really significant amount of time with young children. How do we really support them to be more connected to literacy and providing that in the day-to-day experience of young children?
And I think in partnership, and that's exactly right, Karen, you are, we think a lot about where are the early childhood centers, and if we could concentrate so many of our resources there and provide that strong foundation, then we continue to build on a foundation. And so I think looking at where are you aligned? Where are the age groups you're aligned with? Where are the families that align to the mission of your organization? One of my favorite things about our partnership is working with your program manager, Kristen. We have the same name, and how responsive she is to immediately, bringing us together with the schools that she's working with or the outside groups that she's working with. Having the strong partnership, the working together partnership, the strong belief in what you're doing is right for families and right for children, and the strong belief that your organizations together with this deep community embedment and access to literacy can do so much more. I think, I think when we're thinking about our partners and who we want to partner with, those are the things that are important.
I'd just add, and this is one of my favorite parts about working with Raising a Reader, is just imagine these partnerships and how they show up for the families and the users of it. Sometimes when designing partnerships, organizations have a tendency to do what's most convenient for them. But if you just take a step back and ask, how will you actually show up either at the school or at the district level or at the family level, that will often simplify a lot of the things. So with our partnership with Raising a Reader, most of the users will get no materials directly from Guardians Collective at all. We'll show up in almost of an invisible manner in these learning packs, and people will just see it as one offering, where they get a book bag that's vetted and has excellent content, and have an option to join reading circles without needing to go through any more forms and hoops and loops.
Yeah, I hope to do a good job of answering this question, but it's looking in the mirror and continuing to challenge the work that you're doing and saying, am I doing the best thing for the communities that I'm trying to serve? Are the partners that I'm reaching out to or collaborating with in line with that singular mission? And for us, we created a teacher advisory board because teachers really hold the key. It is Teacher Appreciation Day, by the way, so we appreciate you. To me, teachers really, they're in the communities, they're interacting with students on a daily basis, and they also have access to the families as well. So I'm not doing a great job of answering the question, but teachers definitely play a role in this entire idea of partnership.
Well, it dovetails a little bit with what Karen was saying, because that infrastructure of how do you reach the kids is really fragmented and fractured in many areas. So if you talk about 50% of our kids are in unlicensed daycare or some sort of childcare situation, how one reaches them, how you get them the material, the resources, the support, the information that they need is a really challenging logistical problem. So, but they are critically important. And is literacy one of the things that each of these teachers or childcare providers prioritizes, or is it way down on the list because really it's just about safety and food and time spent together? It's hard to operationalize some of these partnerships sometimes, so they can have the best of intentions and really good thinking behind them, but sometimes it's those details that will just stop a partnership in its tracks or make it so complicated that it's not scalable. And I think that's the real challenge, is how to decomplexify something so that you can actually really get to the kids you're trying to reach for all of the good reasons that everybody here just described. But it can be really hard.
Beautifully said. Beautiful.
Well, and thank you, everybody. And now I want to open up to Q&A from the group. So I think, Jenny, you're going to help facilitate that. Is that correct? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Michelle, and thanks everybody for this rich conversation that I think we'll continue with the Q&A. So for those of you who have put questions in the Q&A box, thank you for that. We're going to be addressing some of those right away, but anyone else that has questions, please continue to put them in there. We have a nice amount of time to do our Q&A conversation. And if you well, yeah, let's start with those questions first in the Q&A box, and then we'll go from there. So one, and some of you touched on, but I wanted to just, ask them directly as well, in case there's other things that you want to say. So one person asks about providing stats regarding results from raising a reader with schools. Are there schools that you engaged with, and have there been any changes that you've seen in the stats with those schools?
Sure, I'll just provide a quick overview, and then I can follow up directly with whoever answered the question. But raising a reader with our classic model, we have engaged in over 39 independent evaluations, and many of them are with school districts. And so some of those outcomes that we've showed it was really focusing on family engagement and improved shared reading routines, and increasing the length of shared reading routines in the home, as well as the literacy skills like just vocabulary and some literacy concepts, and as well as the intrinsic motivation of the child. But I can send a lot more detailed information in a follow-up email to whoever asked that question.
Great, thanks, Michelle. The next question we have here is a question about how the content of the stories that you all are sharing has been chosen to reflect the diversity of the lived experience, especially of children, which some of you I think touched on, but is there anything else that you would like to add about some of the books or why you chose them, for example?
I was just reading, like being new to Worldreader. I've been with Worldreader for about 4 months. And one of my favorite things about onboarding was reading the collection, the children's book collection. I've been really discovering the books and then having some input in books that are coming out this summer. We have an incredibly diverse group of books. They're pulled from global publishers from the work that we've done in Africa and India. And they are about stories about children's lives. And issues that children may face in their lives. And I would say that's how we particularly tackle that issue or represent that. But it's, again, sitting in on some book groups and things like that, it's been really interesting hearing children see how other children in other parts of the world face some of the same challenges that they do here in the United States, and looking at those parallels has been really a fun thing to see.
Mhm.
Since day one, Raising Reader has focused on our collection and being inclusive, representative, and diverse, but we know that we have a lot of learning to do and growing. And so we are actually in the process of doing a book equity audit right now, where we are taking a look at how many authors have their own lived experiences, illustrators as well. Who are the main characters in our stories? And so we'll have results of that equity audit this over the summer. And so we'll be excited to share about the results of our audit. And then we expect to make some additions, including Malcolm's book, in response to that audit.
Great. Anyone else?
I mean, I would just say, as a publisher, one of the things we think about, one of the questions we ask ourselves all the time, every day, for every issue of every magazine is, can every child find themselves somewhere in these pages? And whatever that means, whether it's about your race, your ethnicity, the composition of your family, where you live, what kind of, what the geography, the physical conditions of the way you're living. It doesn't have to be equal one for one in every magazine, but we just want it to be, that whole notion of being a window and a mirror, that notion that you can see yourself reflected and also learn more about another person's life is something we think about all the time.
Just to add to that, I think it's also, using newer forms of collaboration also gives us a chance to speed up our listening cycle. So when does a publisher or a creator of the material find out that the material is not culturally relevant to the families that they're serving? If you are listening and a part of these conversations that happen on a day-to-day basis, perhaps you're able to see and respond to it a lot faster than if you had a regular publishing cycle where you review the outcomes of your books once every year or every time it comes back into print. So shortening those feedback cycles, which is something we can do now, is something that we're personally very excited about being involved in.
I can't speak from the curation of book perspective, but I can speak from an author perspective. When I started my journey, the stories were, I was young, so I'll use that as an excuse. But as I've gotten older, as I've began to consume more information and try to apply it in ways that benefit anyone who reads the book, that ideal of diversity, not just in physical representation, like in my new book, but the ideal of diversity, the idea that that's okay, the idea that right is right, wrong is wrong, but that doesn't mean we can't get along. It's that ideal of diversity that I try to project in my writing today. So.
Thank you, everyone. That's really helpful. And, it made me think in the context of your conversation about sparking joy and curiosity. When I started looking for books that better reflected the kids I worked with maybe 20 years ago, they were hard to find. And when we found them, they often were sad stories of what a hard life these children had, or the hard history of certain cultural groups, obviously, that and it's been a long time in coming, but I do love seeing that stories that are being published more often are we're spreading around the joy and curiosity that all children and all families find in life, even if they have many issues that they have to overcome and challenges. And so I love hearing about that as well in book collections, that kids can see themselves, but they can see all parts of themselves, not only the struggles and challenges they have, but the joys and the values that their family and their culture may have as well.
And just everyday life.
Yes, exactly. All right, another question, which looks like it's for Malcolm. How was community voice incorporated in the development of strategy with communities with those with lived experiences involved in the development. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about when that question came through, but is that something, Malcolm, that you?
Yeah, I think I can touch on that. Community is a focal part of my conversation because when we talk about all the statistics around illiteracy, my community matches that group that's on the tail end of those statistics. We know the 4th grade reading statistic. We know the book ownership statistic. We know the amount of books in homes. We know that in relation to free and reduced lunch. We have all this information. And once I began to consume all this information, I realized that I was in the heart of that community who would fall victim to not fully understanding the importance of literacy and not having access to print. So I did start doing myself a favor this last year. I started asking the question, why? And then once I came up with that answer, I asked another question, why? And what that process did, it continued to take me further back and back and back into the scenario where I had this timeline of perspective that allowed me to really analyze the issue of why things are the way they are today. Not judge them, not form concrete opinions on them, just say, here's how we got here. And with this information, I think that I could come up with ideas and possible solutions to change the trajectory of the path in which we've been headed on for so long. So in my community, it's all you have to do is pull up the statistics and it'll tell you exactly where we are and where we've been and the consequences due to the current crises from COVID-19 and the racial tension that has came about. So with that information, I come to a very hard conclusion that literacy is a poverty issue and it's a health issue. So if we can change these communities from being illiterate to literate, then maybe we give them enough mobility to move out of that situation and to see their perspective a lot different than it's painted in front of them daily, because those daily challenges are hard to overcome. Mary Alice, you said it a moment ago, it's really hard to think about reading a book when you're hungry. It's really hard to think positively when your dad walked out and he hadn't returned in a month. It's hard not to think that the odds are stacked against you when the police knocks on your door looking for your uncle. Like these are the truths. These are the things that happen. These are the things that I've witnessed. These are some of the things that I've been through. So when we talk about community, when we're talking about changing the trajectory of an entire community, I first need to figure out how we got there. Then maybe I have enough information then to say, okay, let's read. Let's read our way into better futures.
Thank you, Malcolm. Any other comments that people have that brought up from what Malcolm had to say on that? I'm going to just read one from the chat. Angela says, thank you for bringing that up, Malcolm. We need to move from solely doing community outreach to also incorporating authentic community outreach. Co-creation of programs and services can be done.
And I'm going to guess more than half the people in the audience wrote down the words, let's read our way into better futures. I just want to say that.
Yes, for sure.
We had a like button. I would have put like.
I was like, oh, I'm going to remember that one.
Yep, thank you. Okay, we have a question here about what groups have you found to be good local financial supporters? Are there any experiences that you've had in that area, any of you?
Well, we would be remiss, the reason we would be remiss if we didn't share who some of our funding partners are. We've had a long-standing relationship with the Masons of California, and they have been strong partners for ours for a number of years and continue to do so. And we also have some other great national partnerships with the Bezos Family Foundation and others. But for local partnerships, it's really, I'll let like some of our local, well, actually we don't have any of our local communities on, but a lot of them are funded by community foundations, and school districts are tapping into some of their stimulus funding to support their programs. And then Karen, I don't know if you have some insight on how some of your local communities are tapping into local dollars.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. The schools have gotten so, or will be getting a lot more funding. So just depending on how those funds are able to be used, we're hoping to be able to access some of those funds, but that's still, kind of the unknown at this time. But, many of our local school districts tap into 21st century funding. They tap into all those different funding streams to be able to really access as much funding as possible for the families in their communities. But still, realistically rely pretty heavily on organizations like Save the Children to bring some of that funding into communities, because it just, we're talking about communities that have very limited resources. And so while we hope we can really build up communities so that they can get connected, get the funding that they need, we know that they still really rely on outside resources such as nonprofit organizations to really bring the funds into those communities.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Karen. So another question we have here is around haphazard literacy instruction and how sometimes teaching colleges may not be preparing teachers around the reading of science or the fundamentals of reading instruction. And we have had other webinars and other partners who have addressed some of this in other GLR Learning Tuesday webinars. But I just wanted to see if any of you had anything to add or talk about in terms of that question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Malcolm.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but to really back in, a big point that I make just from experience and not being a reader as a child and becoming one later in life is cultural relevancy has a lot to do with that process. Now, there are very finite things that need to take place for a foundation of reading to even begin to produce results. But the spark that's needed to be willing to go through that process, because reading is not natural. No one is born a reader. It's an acquired skill. So I have to willingly go into the process and want to know how to read. For the life, I still can't figure out why as a child, I was not interested. But I know once I got to the University of Georgia and I began to understand the benefits of being a reader, that reading would take me out of the financial hardship that I was hoping football would do. When I realized that those two things work together, I read as fast as I could. I went to the local bookstore and I picked up a book and I willingly dove into that tough process of being a reader because now it was relevant to something that I wanted to accomplish. So I think to be short, that making reading and the process of reading culturally relevant definitely does start that process off pretty well.
Yep, thanks. Thanks, Malcolm. Other thoughts on reading instruction?
If I could just add a couple of things on that question. I think it's important for us, especially as Guardians Collective, to create a space where it's a space for collective contemplation, right? Like, people are not coming to these spaces knowing all the answers. They're coming there to just say, hey, this is what my teacher told me about my child's reading speed. Does this match with what you've heard? And oftentimes we'll hear like, oh, wait, like that sounds like a very serious challenge. We should, escalate this to a specialist early on, or maybe that's just completely normal and nothing to worry about. And that's just a 4-year-old being a 4-year-old. But I think, imagining dialogue between educators and families or caretakers as a space for contemplation and not for judgment is a great avenue for us to explore uniformity in instruction, or even just auditing what instruction practices are being deployed in variety of our neighborhoods, and would come as a surprise to no one that the way we teach reading largely changes depending on which zip code you live in. And that, like once we make those things visible, we can start addressing some of that.
Yeah, great point. And, you know, it makes me think also about when we're encouraging families and other people to read with children, how important it is to also include the talking and the singing and the storytelling that many parents who don't read to their children do, and honor that as part of what builds literacy as well.
I was going to say I think some of this goes back to our conversation around joy and the strategies that we were talking about. That, you know, if you are looking at a text and I'm saying, repeat this in a different voice, say, I'm excited when I read this, and I read it, and then you read it back to me, and we go over those texts or those passages several times, we're building fluency. And when we ask children questions about a book, whether we're asking them to retell or what they think comes next, we're building those comprehension skills. Even if your program doesn't specifically and explicitly teach phonemic awareness, letter naming, sounds, segmenting, blending, you still, with books and access to books, can build those fluency and comprehension skills, and identify, hopefully through conversations like Saurabh is talking about with caregivers and teachers, which of those other skills are not there and creating a barrier to your child's fluency or the children you work with, their fluency. So I think having that perspective of we've got to build these foundational skills in order to build these fluency skills, to build our comprehension skills, is super important.
And just to just tie that all together with Raising a Reader, we have a train the trainer model. And so we train our educators and local providers on the ground who then in turn share resources directly to parents. And so we are able to, as Kristen was saying, help the educators. And a lot of our educators might be more home visitors or family childcare providers who might not have the background themselves. So we provide some of that foundational shared reading strategies, early brain development and things like that for those providers so that they in turn can then share it with their families.
Thank you, Michelle, and all of you on that question. I have one question, I think, moving from sort of the content piece of some of what we were talking about to the process a little bit. When you reflect on this partnership that you all have together, I'm wondering if the experience of going through it in this collaborative way has made you think about other partnerships you have. Have there been any challenges that you've had, that you've solved, that you think you'll take forward in other experiences? And also, if has one of those challenges maybe been, maybe others in your organization being less able to see sort of the value of partnering? What do you do in that case if you're feeling like pushing something that maybe others don't? That's maybe 3 questions in one, so sorry about that. But any thoughts on that process piece of partnering?
Raising a Reader is awesome. Superstars. I think they are, for me, and my personal experience with partnerships, they are trailblazers in allowing us to understand the benefit of looking past just competitiveness and raising funds and accessing resources to combining all of our strengths for this super partnership that creates a super foundation that gets more kids access to the opportunities that we all want to provide in the first place. So shout out to Raising a Reader.
And I would just say, partnership can mean lots of different things, right? It doesn't have to be a very formalized MOU that everybody agrees to something. It can be a more informal partnership where you're just relying on one of the partners to provide something, and it doesn't have to be that formalized. So I think too, we just have to continue to get more innovative about how we think about partnership, that it doesn't have to be one thing or another. There's many different ways to partner.
I think it is, I agree with you, Malcolm. If I again wanted to put all kinds of emojis around your words, it has been a terrific partnership. And we have, it's been a gracious partnership, and the fact that, there is room to learn and You know, I'm a huge fan of growth mindset, that no one is ever perfect. And, you know, when you stop, you're not growing because everyone else around you is still moving. And being able to look at each of the affiliates that we've started with Raising a Reader and learning and getting better at partnership each time has been invaluable. But Karen, I love what you said about, we do need to think about how we think about partnerships, you know, and have these formal buckets and these informal buckets, as well as these thought partnerships, which may not result in an MOU, but definitely expand reach and ideas and introductions.
But Jenny, I do think you raised a good point, because it does happen from time to time that partnerships are perceived to be a distraction, or too complex for their own good, or too small for the intended benefit. And so I think that is also a great model that Raising Reader has brought to the table, which is you really understand the benefits, you really understand how the groups are going to work together, you understand where your role and expertise fits in and how it contributes to the larger good. But it is, as I said before, it can be a struggle to get people on board with partnerships if it just feels like, oh, this is, you know, I'm not seeing the benefit here, I'm not seeing the upside, or it's just too much work.
I would completely agree with that. I think one of the things that you know, is particularly interesting right now is it's the value Raising a Reader puts on starting small, starting fast, and then perpetually reevaluating whether things are working or not. Because oftentimes in partnership building, people can end up doing a lot of work in the beginning only to understand that the users or the ultimate, you know, beneficiaries are not finding the value the same ways that they found out about. So, you know, start something very quickly and just evaluate how things are going, and then expand if you need to is a good general idea that we've been fans of.
Well, I have certainly felt the love. Thank you all for sharing. And we are so excited to be partnering with each of you. And I think just to tie it, you know, kind of wrap us up, I'm just taking a look at the time, is just really, I'm really honored to work with all of you, because we are not just thinking about our own organization's needs, but we're truly looking about families' needs. And I think that just doing that together, it just helps our organization in the long run. So I really appreciate your partnerships and working with all of you.
Thank you, Michelle, and all of you for those comments. We did have a poll launched. If it's still up on your screen, we would love to get your feedback. We definitely use that feedback to help improve our webinars from week to week. So please do that if you can. And I think we have covered all the questions. We do have a minute or two if anyone has a burning question they haven't asked. But while we just check on that, any other final thoughts from any of our panelists?
I'd just say feel free to get in touch with any of us if you have more questions.
Super, thank you so much. I know there were some people that wanted to connect, so that's great. And I did put my, I'll put my email in the chat in case you do want to reach out to some of the panelists and get their email addresses. I'm happy to share those as appropriate. So as we wrap up here, I did want to just thank all of you, Raising a Reader and Michelle in particular for pulling the group together, but also all of you for this really rich conversation and discussion that we've had, and as well as example of you know, how partnerships can really work and bring something better than the individual resources that we have. And finally, it's been wonderful to learn a little bit more about each of your organizations individually and the resources that you have as well. So thanks to all of you so much. We really appreciate your participation today. And finally, I just want to point your attention again to our upcoming webinars. There's one at 3 Eastern time today, using technology to accelerate learning, tech-enabled solutions to address learning loss. We have a Crucible of Practice webinar next week at this time frame, which focuses on the work in San Mateo County, their Big Lift Inspiring Summers that they've run and are running again this summer. Then later that day, we'll have our Family Resource Center's webinar, Key to Supported Families and Thriving Communities. And finally, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Utilizing Learning Science to Reach Every Reader, in our Funder conversation on Tuesday the 18th. So thanks again to all of you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.